Let's dive in here. So here's the thing. I've always believed that there was a way to teach somebody how to swing like a tour pro in minutes, because I believe there's always been this underlying movement pattern that if I could figure out what it was and I could get somebody to feel it, then they could do it. And it could be anybody. I'm not talking about somebody who's already a good player or somebody who is a crappy player or anywhere in between. I'm talking about anybody universally, that they could learn how to move properly very quickly if we just could understand what this movement is. Now, the problem is most tour pros have no idea what they do. And if they started thinking about it, they'd be back with the rest of everybody else not being on tour anymore, because you can't think your way through a swing when you're actually playing. Now, the catch is, of course, to learn something and learn something that is mechanically complex, typically the approach that you take is that you have to learn through in steps and chunks and go through it in a mechanical way, because there's no other way to learn it, because everybody's feel is so subjective. One person's feel versus another person's feel are so radically different, and there's such an infinite number of variables in the golf swing that you could chase your tail for circles. And I know many of you can probably relate to this, that you've spent your whole life trying to fix certain problems like over the top, maintaining lag, getting your hips open at impact, hanging back on your back foot, losing the tush line or your posture, or scooping or flipping or chicken wing. I'm certain that most of you can relate to all of those problems. Now, here's what's interesting. I've taught dozens and dozens and dozens of tour pros over my career, and I never worked on any of that with any one of them. Never. Now, that's kind of weird when you think about it. Every single tour pro on the planet does the opposite of what every single amateur does. You never see a tour pro losing his posture and the old puppy dog humping the fire hydrant and casting the club and scooping and flipping at impact and all of those things. It's crazy, right? Like, the amateurs do literally the exact opposite of what the tour pros do. And what's interesting is the tour pros are just moving way more efficient. That's way simpler for them than it is for you, because you are working so much harder. You're doing so many more things in your swing than what a tour pro is. A tour pro is just moving much simpler. So now we're getting to the nuts and bolts here. Let's get into the meat of it. And I'm going to spend some time walking you through this stuff more in depth than normal, because there's things that we've seen that people have questions about or don't understand or what have you. And that's what we're going to talk about first. So if you're standing there, if you have room to kind of get up and move around and still see the screen while I'm doing this, I want you to do that now, because I'm going to walk you through this whole strange movement, this strange sequence of movements that will become very natural, very fluid, very quickly. I wore white shoes that are atrocious looking so you can see my feet better. But the first thing you're going to do, I just want you to stand up, give yourself some room. You don't need a club yet. You don't need to be in your posture. And you can, if you want, take your shoes off to feel this. For some people, it's a little bit easier to feel this with no shoes on. I'm going to do it with shoes on at first, and I'm going to stand kind of closer here to the screens, to the camera, so you can kind of see more in detail. So what is this movement that will allow all of these positions to happen in your swing automatically without you thinking about it? And what is it that the tour pros are doing? So here's my way of teaching you how to do this in a very, very simple way that requires no swing thoughts whatsoever, period. It's just a feeling. And I'm going to keep emphasizing that as we go through this. So here's what I want you to do at first. All I'm going to do, and I'm going to explain everything from a right-handed golfer's perspective, because it's going to be easier as I start explaining all of this stuff, that if I have to say it both ways, it'll be a little confusing. So everything is going to be to a right-handed golfer's perspective, okay? So the first thing I want you to do is I want you to stand up and imagine there's a clock on the ground. So imagine that 12 o'clock is straight in front of you, 3 o'clock to your right, 6 o'clock back behind you. All I want you to do is feel pressure shift around the perimeter of your right foot in a clockwise direction. This is really simple. So at first you can go really slow. And if you're not really certain what this is, I'm going to come up to the camera and show you even more in detail. So here's my right shoe, and you're just going to move pressure in a clockwise direction around the perimeter of your foot. Just in that direction. Make sense? So if you can understand clockwise versus counterclockwise, you can swing properly. This is going to be super simple. So as I'm doing this, I want to relax my hips and I want to relax my legs and just feel pressure going around. Now, I don't have to make this huge movement like this. That's not what we were trying to do. I just want you to feel a very subtle pressure shift, okay? So you're going around and around the merry-go-round. This is what the merry-go-round is. And what you can do as you feel this, you're going to start to feel, Liam got it, without me telling you a whole lot, you're going to all of a sudden feel how your pelvis and your legs and everything begin to move correctly without you having to do much. And you're only thinking or feeling a pressure shift. And it's not about trying to make sure you go through every single phase of the clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. It's not like that at all. This is a feeling of moving pressure in a clockwise direction. And as you see this at first, it's going to start to look a little goofy. It's going to kind of feel like you're doing a hula hoop. And as you keep doing it, then you're going to feel how all of a sudden everything that you've tried to do in your swing, maintaining your posture, getting your hips up, get off your right foot, maintain lag, it's all going to happen automatically. So the first thing you've got to understand is that the merry-go-round is the engine of the swing. Your right foot, for a right-handed golfer, pressure moving in a clockwise direction, is the engine. And if you can do this, you can swing a golf club properly, very quickly. Now, a lot of things that we've seen are people kind of get really rigid. They're trying to force it. I want you to be super relaxed, because the more relaxed your hips are, the faster they can move. The faster they can move, the faster you can swing. So stay very relaxed with this. Now, at some point, while this merry-go-round is going, this is the engine of the swing, at some point we need to get off this merry-go-round. And that happens when your pressure is at about 6 o'clock, give or take. So back behind you, on your heel. As you move your pressure to your heel, you're going to come up onto your right big toe. And as you do that, all I want you to think about or feel at first is taking your right knee and replacing where your left knee is. Now, of course, it's not going to go exactly there. And all of these things at first are exaggerations, okay? So you're going around the merry-go-round. As I go back to 6 o'clock, I'm just going to get up onto my right big toe. As I watch as I go to 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, you'll notice that my hips are naturally beginning to move back to the lead side. This is a natural thing of me feeling pressure moving from 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock. You can see my pelvis moving laterally. This makes the pressure shift from your trail foot to your lead foot very natural and very effortless. You don't have to think, okay, when do I shift, or how far do I go this way, or how much do I shift that way? If you just feel your pressure going around and around, you will feel how it's natural to get up onto your big toe, your pressure to shift back to the left, and then just take your right knee and point it at about 9:30, 10 o'clock. And it's okay to let the heel come up for when we're doing this. That's perfectly normal. We want to exaggerate these things, especially if you're kind of used to hanging back or hitting really flat-footed. I want you to let your heel come up and get up onto your right big toe. Now, I'm going to talk about some more of these things in details in just a moment, but I want you to understand the big picture, to be feeling this as you start to understand how to move your pressure. Your only job is to shift pressure in a clockwise direction. When you're watching me right now do this movement, it kind of looks like a golf swing, right? And if I got in my posture, it would look more like a golf swing. And all I'm doing is going around the merry-go-round and getting off the merry-go-round. I'm going to kick that kid off the merry-go-round, right? So we're going around, pressure shift, and forward. Around the merry-go-round, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, right big toe, done. Now, what's cool about this, and I'm just going to check the screen here, make sure everybody's good. Audio is good. All right, great. Thanks, guys. So as you're going around the merry-go-round, what I want you to start to pay attention to is how it has this butterfly effect. I call this a vortex generator. It starts as something very, very small, but it spirals up the body and gets the whole body to do everything that you need it to do without you thinking about it. So watch as I go around. As I'm moving just pressure, I'm just going to stay on the merry-go-round for a minute. I'm going to get off the merry-go-round. you'll notice that my ankle is moving more than my foot, because my foot's not moving at all, right? It's just planted on the ground. And now as I continue to go around, my knee is moving more than my ankle, and my hip is moving more than my knee. Everything in my body, you can see, my whole lower body is moving in this clockwise orbit. And all I'm doing is focusing on shifting pressure in a clockwise pattern around my right foot. You see how simple it is to not think, okay, I know in the backswing I got to get to my right foot, right? So, well, how far do I shift to the right, and when do I shift to the right? I know my hip also needs to go back. So how far does it go back, and when do I do that? What's the timing of that? If you don't have to think about any of those things, because they're important, if you can just feel pressure, watch what happens. I'm going to grab my chair here, because many of you have asked, like, how does this work with the dead drill and the clamshell drill? Those drills teach you the positions. The AXIOM makes them happen naturally. So what you're going to see, I'll do my clamshell drill here, right? You know in the backswing that my right hip has got to go back. Every great ball striker on the planet, their right hip gets a little bit deeper in the backswing. Well, how would that happen here? All I have to do is I'm shifting pressure. As my pressure moves back to my heel, my hip naturally gets back a little bit deeper, right? So I didn't have to think about how to load up my right side at all. I didn't have to think about my right hip. I didn't have to feel any, how much do I slide? How much do I shift? I'm just thinking about pressure shift around clockwise movement of my foot. So now as I go back, now I know that during this phase, the old squat to square, that both hips attach. Well, when is this happening? It's happening naturally. As I move from 6 o'clock and 7 o'clock and 8 o'clock, my left hip naturally goes back. So it begins to attach to the chair. So now I'm in the old squat to square position as I'm moving to 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, and then up onto my big toe. Now you know the last phase from the clamshell drill and the dead drill is that my left hip goes deeper than where it was at address, right? You can see there's clearly spacing here between my butt and the chair. And then as I come down, now my left hip is actually on the chair and moving it back a little bit. That happens as I take my right knee, we're using my right big toe. I'm not really thinking my knee or feeling my knee. I'm focusing on my right big toe. I'm just coming up onto it because I want everything to be really simple. I am feeling just my foot, and my foot is making everything happen. So as I begin to move into this post-up phase, my right foot is doing all of that work. I don't have to think about my left leg posting up or getting deeper. I'll do it from up the line because it's a little bit easier to see in certain circumstances. So you'll see as I go around, as I go 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, you'll see my hip getting deeper, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, onto my big toe. My right knee goes to about 9:30, 10 o'clock. Again, I'm only focusing on feeling my foot, and everything in my swing, every single position that I need to achieve, everything that I know that all the tour pros do, that you've seen all the tour pros do, you can do everything by just feeling this clockwise pressure shift around your right foot. Does it make sense so far? I'll take just a quick look at the chat here for just a moment, make sure everybody's, yes, and for lefties, it is counterclockwise. It looks like you guys are getting this. You can feel it so far. Just want to make sure everybody's on the same page. Makes sense. All right, good. So how do we, I'm just going to take a quick look. Will this help shallowing the club? Absolutely. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. So how do we get the arms to work? The cool thing first, I want you to think about this, is that your right foot is something that literally barely moves in the swing. It hardly moves at all. You can train this very quickly. And you already know, if you've already worked through the dead drill and the clamshell drill and all the other stuff on the site, now you realize this is like simple, right? You already know it. And the people who have already spent the time going through the boot camp and doing the dead drill stuff, now you know how to make all of those things happen automatically. And that's what's cool about this, is because everything from this point forward is done through your right foot. Your throttle is your right foot. You guys know I'm a big pierhead. When I was thinking about how to get somebody to swing the way that I wanted them to, and make it natural and athletic? And how can I teach them how to feel what I feel in my swing? Obviously, I went back to the things I know, and I know cars pretty well. And you guys all drive cars, and you have sensitivity trained in your right foot from how hard you squeeze the throttle. If you right foot brake, how hard you squeeze the right brake. That right foot is already trained and has been trained for years and years and years. You're already very, very skilled at what to do with your right foot and the pace and the tempo and the rhythm that you do it. So if you want to swing faster, your pressure shift happens faster. If you want to swing slower, it happens slower. But it's all governed by this right foot that you've been training for years and years and years behind the wheel of a car. Not to mention, one of the things I wanted to do was people who are naturally right side dominant. That's the vast majority of golfers in the world. Certainly not everybody, of course, but those who are naturally very right side dominant, you have two choices. You figure out a way to use the right side that doesn't cause you to swing over the top and cast the club and et cetera, and lose your posture like most right side dominant stuff does. Or you train the left side. Left side takes more time to train. Both of them work equally well. And those of you who have seen the left versus right video where I've got a clip of Ernie and Tiger up there, and you see like, wait a second, how do I reconcile Tiger saying one thing and Ernie saying another? They both work. But I wanted to be able to leverage the stuff that people do naturally quickly. If you have a movement pattern that you already do really well, this is a way to shortcut it. And so if I can get you to feel the natural side of what you're already coordinated, you've been training this right foot for years, and now you can use it to control your golf swing as well. And all you have to understand is this clockwise pressure shift. So now, how does this work with the arms? So first things first, the most important thing is that the right foot never stalls out. If it stalls out, your whole engine stalls out. So your right foot, that merry-go-round and getting off the merry-go-round, is the most important thing. As soon as that quits, the arms take over, the shoulders take over, and you're in trouble, okay? So your focus, your feeling is always getting this right foot to move, keeping this thing going in this clockwise pressure shift. And if you can do that, and those of you who've seen some of the other videos on the site that we've been testing, I show you that this happens in the Tour Pro swings with the force plates. You can see their pressure move in this clockwise direction. It's very, very subtle. But when you see it and you understand how it gets your pelvis and your core and your legs and everything to move correctly, when we add the arms in, it's a piece of cake. Because the hardest thing about the arms is getting them in sync with the lower body. Every amateur on the planet struggles with this. The arms take over, the shoulders take over, the lower body stalls out, and then we're in trouble. The swing is dead at that point. There's no power there whatsoever. So how do we get them to be in sync? Because if they're in sync, then we have this cumulative synergistic effect of adding power from our legs, from our trunk, from the ground. I have way more muscle here than I do in my arms and hands. So how do I get them in sync? Well, you play air guitar while you're on the merry-go-round, okay? So I want you to understand that this simple feeling, again, an exaggeration, we're going to do all right side dominant stuff for the moment because I feel that it's easier to learn it this way. And then you can add whatever you want. And this is the beauty of it. This is a platform. The AXIOM is a starting foundation to make that overall dynamic movement of the swing natural and effortless and be something you can learn really, really fast. But if you want to change for personal preference to be left side dominant, right side dominant, higher hands, lower hands, I tested all that stuff on here. It doesn't matter. You do what feels best for you, what you want to do, what's going to allow you to shape shots the way that you want. But what I really wanted to do was make the backswing irrelevant. And that's something that has been a goal of mine for a long time because I've always said that in the rotary swing that the arms are a variable in the swing. You can elevate them higher, you can elevate them lower, you can get them a little bit deeper, you can get them more in front, and you can still play great golf. But I hate variables. I want something to make it simpler so that you don't have 50,000 different things to try on the range or on the course. Let's just have one thing that's like, yes, this just works. I don't need to think about it. And how do I make the backswing that way? How do I make the backswing irrelevant? Well, the hardest thing about golf is that we're moving in two different directions. We're moving clockwise in the backswing and then counterclockwise in the downswing. At least that's how you're moving it if you're doing it incorrectly. I believe the tour pros are actually always moving clockwise. everything is always moving clockwise. But think about this for a second. If you're to rotate back clockwise and then have to switch directions and change all of that force to go counterclockwise in the downswing in the 10th of a second, how hard is that? It's super hard. That's what you're doing right now that's making golf so freaking hard. And it's the hardest thing in the world to do, and no other sport tries to do it except for golf. If you think about, I've talked about this before, if you're shooting a basketball, essentially everything is moving in one direction to shoot this basketball. You don't have to think, okay, let me go in this backswing and then in this forward swing. That's way more complicated. Even if you're throwing the ball, everything is moving. Here's the whole trick to this. How do we get everything moving in the same direction in the golf swing, even though we're going back in one direction and down in another? That's the complexity of the golf swing. And that's what this is designed to solve, is because if we can get everything moving in one direction, everything syncs up automatically. So how do we do that? Right hand only at first for right-handed golfers. Here's all I want you to do. I want you to exaggerate making a clockwise movement with your hand. So now you're going to imagine that that clock is perhaps up on the wall in front of you. And you're just taking your right hand and you're going to turn as you're doing this while you're on the merry-go-round and start moving your right hand in a clockwise circle. Make sense? So all I'm doing, not really thinking about golf, I'm just making a clockwise circle with my right hand while I'm on the merry-go-round. And if you want, you can get off the merry-go-round. And this is when I'm strumming up on my air guitar. You see, I'm going to be a big rock star. I'm holding the neck of the guitar and I'm really rocking out, strumming up here. You'll see as I put these two together, what happens to my golf swing. My arms naturally sync up with the pressure shift in my lower body. I don't have to think about it because it feels completely natural. As my right hand is going back, where is your pressure? The hands are pulling me into position. They're making the pressure shift back to the back of my foot happen completely automatically. The momentum is helping pull me into position. Normally, people's arms pull them out of position. I wanted to figure out a way to do the opposite. How could I make a mistake with my arms and it still helped pull me into a better position instead of the opposite? So as I'm going back, you'll feel that my right hand at its deepest point, as it begins to fall and shallow out because it's making a clockwise circle, that my pressure is at 6 o'clock. As my hand begins to come back down, I'm at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock. And now, as I come down, you'll see that as I go to strum up, it naturally occurs at the time that I'm going to get off the merry-go-round. You guys feel that okay? I'm just going to check the chat here while you guys are looking. Does it create a big in-out path? Exaggeration, guys. This is a big exaggeration. That's what I want you guys to feel right now. Don't worry about path or plane or any of this stuff. This is about feeling, okay? Very, very important that you understand the big picture here. The big picture is that golf is really freaking hard when you're moving in two different directions. And when you understand that you can move everything in one direction, even if I'm making this big goofy air guitar on a merry-go-round movement, my body is beginning to move into perfect positions every single time without me thinking about it. And it feels effortless. I can move fast. I can feel athletic again. I don't have to think about all these damn positions throughout the whole swing. I can just feel this natural clockwise movement of my air guitar and this natural clockwise movement of the pressure shift in my right foot, and everything falls into place. Now, what happens if I grab a golf club? Doesn't matter, right? I can take it back straight up. It doesn't matter. We've talked about the old Matthew Wolf thing. It's exactly what he's doing. You don't have to do this, of course. You can, but the point is, I wanted to make the backswing somewhat irrelevant. As long as it's moving in the same direction, clockwise with the right hand, clockwise with the right foot, it doesn't matter. It's the direction, not the positions. Let's start mastering movements instead of perfecting positions. So if I can get this movement to just be an exaggerated clockwise movement with my hand, you'll see that all of a sudden, everything that you've tried to do in your swing, maintaining posture, getting the club to shallow out, maintaining lag, it all happens. All I'm doing here to get the club to shallow out, my right wrist is moving clockwise, my right elbow, my right shoulder, pressure my right foot, they're all always moving clockwise. So if I can do this, then I can swing like a pro. If I put both hands on the club, I don't have to take this big exaggerated loop. That's a thing, if you're really inside and over the top, like a typical high handicapper, what direction are your hands moving? What did you just do? You moved counterclockwise. Now guess what happens when you rip the club inside and move your hands counterclockwise in the downswing? It pulls your body out of position. If you stand up, if you swing over the top, if you lose your posture, you're moving counterclockwise. If you move clockwise, you can't swing over the top. The club has to shallow out. If you're moving your right wrist clockwise, how would you ever cast the club? Casting the club is doing this with my wrist. I'm not doing this at all. I am moving my wrist in a clockwise fashion. Now I have all the lag in the world. How would I ever lose it? All I'm doing is going around the merry-go-round, clockwise with my right arm, and releasing. And there's speed for days. I don't have to try and produce speed. So if you have a club, this is what I want you to feel. It's so simple, so natural. Just even if you want to just pick the club straight up, it's easier at first. Just make sure you turn. Again, all the stuff that I've taught you over the years, the right shoulder blade glide, all of that stuff, it applies here. You just don't have to think about it. But if you don't turn, if you just pick your arm up, that's not a golf swing, right? So I still want you to turn. You can feel that right shoulder blade glide. All of those things still happen the same way. If you wanted to talk about the 4-square drill, right? We've got the club out here. This is keeping it in box 2 to the extreme, right? And then as you come down, you just let the club come through, and I want you to release it. The release is very, very simple. If you think about slinging a rock on a string, if you had a string on in your right hand and it was hanging down, there was a rock on here, how would you release that thing? All right? It's not a big arm movement. To get the speed in it, it would be a lot of right wrist clockwise movement. You can feel how your wrist needs to be supple to do this. And as you do that, then you can feel how you would sling that rock down the target line. That's how I want you to feel with your right hand. That's where the speed is. So now, of course, it doesn't matter how much you take this club on this clockwise circle. Tiger Woods, John Rahm, Tony Finau, they're all doing the exact same thing, but the circle is much tighter. So when you see the club shallow out, if you want a very natural, conventional backswing like mine, I don't have some big exaggerated Matthew Wolff move. That to me is inefficient. I don't need to do that, but you can. My hands look more like this, like you've seen in my swing, but it's still a very small clockwise circle. If you can put those two things together, that's all you need to be able to understand how to move the club properly without having to think about anything in your swing. You feel your right foot. Get that merry-go-round going. Keep that pressure shift going, moving around in a clockwise circle. Get your right hand moving around in a clockwise circle. And that's the whole kit and caboodle. When you put both hands on there, you just maintain that same feeling. You can do it with your left hand and get the same thing. As long as your left hand is moving in this clockwise circle, it doesn't matter where the club goes. Every single time, I can literally pick it straight up over my head. Look where the club comes down. I can take it over in front of the ball. Still comes down in the same spot. What I can't do is move it counterclockwise. As soon as I do that, you're going to fall into every single bad habit that every amateur on the planet struggles with. So I'm going to take a quick look at the chat to make sure, yes, it's the same for every single club on the bag. So, yes, every club, why would it change? We want one movement pattern. Everything's exactly the same every single time. Some of you have asked about short game stuff. That was not by design by me. I was not thinking about short game when I was creating this at all. But a lot of people who have been really static with their lower body and, you know, chip with very flippy hands and all of this stuff, they have felt that if they just integrate this into their short game stuff, which is I started to think about how I feel when I chip and pitch. I do this naturally without thinking about it. This is the problem by learning from somebody who does things naturally without thinking about it. It's very hard to understand what they're really doing. But when I chip, I move my pressure in the same way, just like I do in a full swing. It's just much smaller. Let's see. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the Q&A stuff, and whoever's got votes at the top, whatever questions are voted on at the top. Let's see. So I'm going to go ahead. So if you guys go to the Q&A box and post your questions in there, I'll try to, the ones that haven't been voted on, I'll try to measure or try to talk about how we get through them. Where to start swing on the foot. All right, thank you, Craig. I'm going to keep Craig handy here because he's been going through a lot of these questions here. So the right foot, something I want to be very, very clear about. This is not about going through your pressure at every single step on the clock. Very important that that's not the point of this at all. This is about having a feeling of being fluid and natural and athletic and quick and fast and powerful without having to think through all of these different things. So where does your pressure start on your foot? It really doesn't matter. The important thing is that you have a clockwise direction. So if you started on your toes, which you can, there are tour pros that do it, that's fine. Just get going back in the clockwise direction. If you're starting at 12 o'clock, it's not where I start, but does it really matter? It doesn't matter when the movement is going in the right direction, right? So I could start on my inside of my foot and just go around. And again, even if I'm starting on the inside, I know a lot of people, you know, there's drills that have been out forever where you put something on the outside of your right foot, especially if you're used to kind of swaying. That stuff, it doesn't really matter. The important thing is I want you to feel athletic and balanced and then get the feeling of the clockwise direction. So it doesn't matter so much where you start. That's getting, you know, very technical. Of course, you don't want to be in a position where you're way off balance. If you're way on your heel, well, you have nowhere to go. So you don't want to start way back on your heel. That's off balance in the other direction. You can start on your ankle and make this movement smaller or what have you. The important thing is to feel balanced and athletic so that this clockwise movement feels natural to you. So thank you, Craig, for that. Let's see. Getting knee pain when pushing off. There should be no pain whatsoever. Rotary swing has always been about injury prevention because you know all the stuff that I've gone through with my own body and all the students that I've helped with back pain and knee pain, all those things. So there should be no pain at all. In fact, I'm not pushing my right knee and I'm not really pushing off my right foot. This is important. So let me get into the details here a little bit. Your right foot, this pressure shift, my right foot has no pressure on it right now. I can lift it up. If you're hanging back here and pushing hard off your foot, you're missing the forest for the trees. Every single tour pro on the planet, just about, by the time that they're starting their transition, the vast majority of their pressure is already shifted over to the lead side. This makes that natural, but it shouldn't. You can see my foot's dragging, right? It's light. This is not, if I have pain here, I have way too much pressure back here. Get off that right side. Use that pressure shift to help you get over so that you can be very light on this foot. When you think about what your foot is doing and all the little nuances and nuts and bolts of it, when you watch what happens, you know that the best ball strikers in the world, their right foot tends to kind of pivot in like this. I'm exaggerating this, of course. Tiger's probably one of the easiest ones to see this. His lower body moves so well. And you could see that, you know, the right foot kind of curls in like this. Well, that happens naturally as I move up onto the ball of my foot and begin to keep that clockwise pressure movement, right? Why would my right foot move in? Because I'm moving pressure in a clockwise direction. That makes my right foot want to move in that direction. So should be no pressure on your right foot whatsoever. Let's see. I'm looking at the questions now. Will this be available for download? Yes, we'll have this available for a couple days. Yep. So yes, we'll let this be up for a couple days. Where's the pressure start of the backswing? We just went over that one. Does the AXIOM system have any tendency to result in a hosel? Why would it do that? It doesn't make any sense to me, so no. I will try to address that as best I can, but the only way that you would ever, if you're hitting it off the hosel, there's something majorly wrong going on. Typically, it's losing posture or things like that, or coming too far from the inside or what have you. But again, think about the clamshell drill and the dead drill. What I'm trying to do is my right elbow is coming down, is make room for this right elbow. So the way that I do that, if you watch, if I bring my right arm down, like most golfers do, and I don't get off my right side and don't move my hips, my right elbow just gets jammed into my hip. It has nowhere to go. So of course I'm not going to do that. I wouldn't be able to hit the ball. So I tend to then lose my posture to make room for my right arm to swing out away from me. What you're trying to do with this is that as your right elbow is coming from this deep position and coming back in, what I'm doing is making room for my elbow. You see how far my right hip's moving? That's what creates a secondary tilt. And now my right elbow can come in close to my side and release from the inside, but I have room. This is key. If my right hip doesn't move to get off that merry-go-round and my right elbow gets jammed into my side, then I'm not going to have any room to swing. So then you will start to move the club out away from you and thrust the hosel toward the ball, which is no bueno. And of course, if you lose your posture because you're pushing your knee towards 11 o'clock instead of toward the target, then you will also have the tendency for you to lose your posture. But you'll notice as I go down and I just move around, you can see both butt cheeks, and I've moved way out. My right foot's super light, and I have all the room in the world to come down from the inside. There's no way that I could ever hit it off the hosel. Let's see. I'm checking Craig's text messages here. Let's see. Where should right foot weight be it in? Up on the toe and very little on it. Do I see the value in buying one's own swing catalyst? I don't. I'll talk about that in just a moment, but the long and short of this, these things are super, super cool. They are very expensive. This thing is over $20,000. But as I said, I can manipulate the data to get it to look however I want, which is not what I was looking for. I was looking for something that says, if I move this way, will the data prove out that this is the safest way, the most efficient way? Because we do know from the swing catalyst data that when we see these double peaks in vertical force, that there are issues with back pain and hip pain and those types of things. We've seen that in some of the tour pros that have been on the swing catalyst and been experiencing back pain. But as an amateur, do you need something like this? I know some students that have it. The ability to interpret the data from this and do anything actionable with it is really, really low for the average guy, I would say. I tried to count at one point. It was like 30,000 shots I hit on this thing over the past year. And now that I've hit that many shots, I know exactly, and it didn't take that long, of course, but there are things that I was looking for that are very, very minute and difficult for the average person to really spend their time wasting understanding that stuff. I wouldn't recommend that you need something like this. If you can get on one, will it be informative or eye-opening? Potentially, sure. But again, it won't really teach you anything. It's like a training aid. A training aid doesn't teach you anything. A training aid simply makes you do something in an unnatural way for a brief period of time while you're wearing or using that training aid. But as soon as you take it off, what did you learn? You didn't really learn anything. And this is, it's not even a training aid in that sense, that it's just a flat piece of metal that's measuring stuff. And does that teach you anything at all? No, you need to be able to interpret this data and do something actionable with it. And that is really, really tricky when there is no standardization. There's no way of looking at things and understanding what this stuff means and how it correlates to your golf swing. In an ideal world, we wouldn't even need cameras. Now, of course, we still need cameras. We still need mirrors. That stuff is still totally applicable to everything that we're doing. But you now can feel an accurate feeling that will produce accurate positions, proper positions in your swing, and emphasize that as long as you're doing that feeling correctly, which is really simple, right? Now, of course, it's super, super simple. And some of you are going to go out and play your best golf of your life. And some of you are still going to be like, I don't get it. That's life. That's the world, right? That's why we're still here. And Craig is still, and Chris are still doing in-person lessons, because that's the fastest way, is just have somebody take a quick look at you, because this movement is so simple. It's not going to take a rocket surgeon to be able to put this stuff together for you and be like, okay, this is what you're doing wrong. So these in-person lessons would be really helpful. And I did actually, Craig and Chris both wanted to give you guys a deal if you want to get a checkup. So I'll put that up there real quick. They both wanted to give you guys 20% off for whoever attended the webinar. So I'll put those up here real quick. And so you guys, if you want to, you can look at both of those and take a lesson with either one. And hopefully they'll both stay up on the screen there. Oh, one of them wiped out. So I will put Craig's at the top of the chat box here. And then Chris's you will see in the bottom left there. So that will, you should be able to get, shoot. Well, I'll put Craig up for a little bit because I can't have both up at the same time. So I'll put Craig's up for a little bit and then I'll put Chris's up in just a moment. So, and I'm just going to look at a couple messages here, more on which release, switch to the right or left. Okay, so let's talk about the release for a moment. At some point in the swing, things switch from being clockwise to counterclockwise. Now, in an ideal world, that's not during the transition, right? Because we know if we're going back here and we switch to counterclockwise, that is what creates an over-the-top movement, an early extension, a high right hip, hanging back on the right side. It's all counterclockwise movement. If you keep the movement being clockwise instead of counterclockwise, then that should, the release should happen naturally. Now, of course, that's different for everybody. Some people are going to pick up on that really fast, and some people are going to need a little bit more information. So let me talk about it for those who need a little bit more detail on it. What's really happening here? And again, at first, it's easiest with just the trail hand, your dominant hand. But if you want to do this left hand dominant, it doesn't matter. It works the same either way. But as I'm coming down to release, you'll see that the club is still falling this way. This is a, I'll do it from this. This is a clockwise movement. Now, I don't want to come this far underneath, but you get the idea that as the club is coming down, as it's continuing, at some point, it can't go anymore, and the centrifugal force makes the club release. I don't really have to think about that. I'm simply just letting it move and getting myself open, getting that right foot moving, and then the club naturally releases. So you shouldn't need to feel this all of a sudden, this counterclockwise shift in your right hand or left hand, either one, to release the club. It should be more of the slinging the rock and shaking hands down the target line feel, rather than going down here and then trying to flip the face over. That's no good. We want to feel that it's here, here, I'm in the release point, and then it's going to happen very naturally. So you shouldn't need to do anything with your hands. You should always feel clockwise movement, and then the counterclockwise release should happen totally automatically. Let's see, I'm going through the questions in the Q&A, so the ones that you guys have voted up. Combining the RST, dead drill, and AXIOM would start the merry-go-round around 3 o'clock. 3 o'clock's totally fine. Again, it doesn't really matter where your pressure is. It just needs to be able to move. Doug Weebeek, saying that's just short game specialty shots where the weight is predominantly on the front foot at setup. Nope, those are very different. So this is more of a full body, full movement golf swing where we're looking for more power. But if you're hanging on the left side for something, it doesn't apply there. Putter specialty club. I would not talk about any pressure shift in the putter. Let's see. Once over to the left, should we still be pushing off the ground with the left foot, or just let the weight swing from right to left? That's a good question, Chris. So my goal with this was to make the entire golf swing as simple and natural as humanly possible. It was not about trying to feel all these different things. Now, I did talk about, there's in the new video section that some of the RSA members have been testing out with us, there's a video on there with John Rahm where I'm showing his AXIOM movement. It's very, very clear to see him doing this exact same thing. Once you now know to look for it. Before, you probably didn't notice at all, but you'll see it in Jessica Korda, Justin Rose, John Rahm, Tiger Woods, every golfer who's at a high level, they pretty much all do the same thing with this big core overarching movement. But how does that apply to what the lead side is doing? You can do either one. It doesn't really matter. My goal was to make it really simple. And simple is focusing on exclusively the pressure shift of the right foot. If I do that, then my left leg naturally straightens. But my left leg has been trained because the dead drill and the clamshell drill and so on. So if your left leg still kind of looks like this, then sure, you're still going to need to feel that left hip post up and pushing that left foot into the ground, but it should happen naturally. That's the goal. Is this should be very quick, very subtle. You shouldn't have to think about it. And just the pressure shift of the clockwise movement of the right foot should make all of these things happen automatically. Let's see. How do you start the swing? It's a good question. Starting the swing is very subjective and going to be a little bit different for everyone. But the point is that you need to feel this engine working. If your right foot is going, if that right foot is always awake and it's always working, that's the engine of the swing, then that is your throttle pedal, your brake pedal, it's everything. And so if you can just put your brain there, and you don't really need to think about the arms. And this is a feedback that we got in a lot of the early phase testing, is that the more certain people focused on their arms, let's say it was about 50-50, people who focused too much on their arms, their right foot stalled out. This is very, very common. So your right foot is really your focus. The arms, as I said, I wanted to make the backswing somewhat irrelevant. I spent so much time hitting balls with high hands last summer, low hands last summer, mid hands, and everywhere in between, and trying everything to see what differences it made in my speed, and what I saw on the ground and the force plates and all of those things. And it really didn't make much of a lick of difference. You can play great golf with any of them. So I don't really care so much about what my arms are doing. Now, of course, they can't move in the wrong direction, of course. But if you can feel more of your foot, then your foot is moving your whole lower body and your hips. And you know how important your hips are to the swing. Your hips are everything. If your hips are in the wrong spot, then I don't care who you are, you're always going to be swinging with your arms and shoulders, and you're going to be making the same mistakes that you've been making for years. So the important thing is that the foot is where your brain is. If you can feel that foot, just like you do when you drive the car, you don't have to think about it. You know how hard to squeeze the gas. You know how hard to push the brake. I want you to have that same natural feeling of your foot movement in your golf swing. So that's what you should be feeling when you're thinking about how to start your swing. Yes, Craig's asking, did I open Q&A? It is up there. I'm answering questions in the Q&A boxes now. So if you have questions, go in there and start posting. So Matthew saying you can't make contact with the ground. How substantial is weight shift to outside of right foot? It's not substantial at all. It's, first of all, think again, just moving pressure. It's not, I'm trying to make this big move. You're just trying to quickly do this. And think about that in the context of the swing. While we're doing this movement, I'm exaggerating this, trying to get you to feel looser in your hips and your lower body. But as you're doing this, in the real swing, there's not time for your hips to make this big gyration, this big clockwise orbit, right? It's very, very, very small. So in the real swing, you don't have time to go way to the outside. And again, that's not the point. The point is to feel this quick pressure shift. And this is how fast it happens in the real swings. You know, I'm moving quickly. So it's not, again, this big movement. It's about getting the feeling of this happening very quickly and naturally. Let's see, I'm still going back through. How do we think about shoulders? Again, the purpose of this is that if you're focusing on moving clockwise, then your shoulders are going to turn naturally. Now, again, not the case for everybody. As I was talking about a minute ago earlier, that the arms have a tendency to distract you from the foot. And the foot is way more important because that's getting your whole body to do the things that it has to do. You have to get off your left side. You have to get your hips open, all those things. So your shoulders, the only thing you really need to be focused on is just getting your hands to feel like they're moving in sync with your pressure shift. And that's what's cool about this, is that the momentum of your hands moving clockwise naturally makes you want to feel the pressure shift moving and continually moving in the downswing. Can you quickly say what a left-handed golfer needs to do? It's the exact same, just substitute right foot for a left foot and clockwise for counterclockwise. And that's why I didn't want to try and explain it both ways, because you can see it get very confusing very quick. But if you're a lefty, everything is left hand, left foot, counterclockwise. If you're a righty, it's right hand, right foot, clockwise movement. All right, cool. They showed up now. So yeah, now you guys should see all of the questions, and you should be able to vote them up there. So if you click a little thumbs up, that'll tell me which ones you guys want me to answer first. Is there any manipulation of the wrist on the follow through? Absolutely not. If you're, they're moving around on me. Okay. You always talk about the right foot is rolling in slightly. Why should I now lift the right foot? The right foot is still rolling in. Nothing that you've ever learned from rotary swing has changed one lick. The point is, one, when we see people do this stuff and make swings, they hang back on the right foot and do this. We want you to learn how to get off the foot and learn how to shift your pressure, right? And so this movement, you'll see, as I go around, and now I'm at 6, I can feel that I'm at 7 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, sorry, can't know how to count anymore. 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, you'll see that my right foot is rolling in naturally because I'm moving pressure to the inside. And as I go up onto the ball of the foot, that clockwise pressure movement makes that heel continue to go inside even more, just a little bit. And so I'm still rolling in. Now, this is normal with an iron to keep that foot down. You'll see most tour pros keep the foot down. There's exceptions, of course. Colin Morikawa's, right way up on his toe at impact. You can do that. I don't think it's necessary. But when you're going to put a little oomph into the ball and you want to really get moving when you're hitting the driver, then it's perfectly okay to get up on that toe earlier than you would when you're iron. Keeping that heel down is a control thing. It helps you have more control of your pelvis, your hips, and speed, which is what we're looking for with an iron. I'm not looking to hit an iron as far as I can on every shot. There's no point to that. I'm looking to hit it with the greatest amount of control. So as you're coming down, that right foot should still be down on the ground as you're doing this, but you can still see that my pressure is off. I'm just lightly on my right big toe. The movement's still the same. So are there any changes with the metals just set up? Nope, no changes. Everything's the same. The movements are the movements. Can you show us a full shoulder turn with the Axiom and talk us through it? Full shoulder turn, everything's exactly the same. Literally nothing has changed. This movement of the arms being clockwise is just to get the feeling of syncing up. You can see as I do this, even as an exaggerated motion, my arms and my lower body are in sync. They're moving together properly, perhaps for the first time for many of you. So what does it look like in the real swing? It's exactly the same. My shoulder turn hasn't changed at all. What I'm really fixated on is that clockwise movement of the pressure on my foot, because that gets my hips moving correctly, it gets my pressure moving correctly, and it gets my shoulders moving. So I'm just getting my hands moving in this clockwise circle. I don't have to think about my shoulders or arms or any of those things. How would the 9-to-3 drill work? Exactly the same. It's just going to be much, much smaller as you're doing this. So I'm still doing the same thing. I'm just making this quick little pressure shift around my right foot, but everything else is exactly the same. You can see it. Am I right? That's why I wore these ugly white shoes, to really exaggerate so you could kind of see how my pressure moves around my foot, even in a little 9-to-3 drill. It's just shorter, quicker. And yes, you'll have access to this afterwards. What's the best drill you recommend for this? Seriously? This is the drill. The axiom is the movement. Maybe I didn't explain it very well. The whole point of this is that you're feeling one overall overarching movement. The pressure of the right foot, the hands moving in a generalized clockwise direction. It really doesn't matter where they go, as long as it's clockwise. And you don't have to think about drilling all this stuff. This is the drill. The drill is the swing, and the swing is the drill, which was the purpose of the dead drill. But this, it incorporates the arms and the club and everything immediately so that you can immediately feel how these are synced up in the swing to make it very simple and very easy to understand. trying to get to some of the, where should the arms and hands be when the pressure is on the heel of the right foot? Don't think so much about trying to perfect this stuff and getting your hands like, okay, my pressure is at 437 on my right foot, and it's moving to 5 o'clock, and now it's at 5:15, and my hand should be at exactly this point. It's not the point at all. You can't learn like that. You can't think like that. You can't possibly think fast enough to make all of that stuff work. So where should the pressure be? You should feel it. As my hand is moving back, my pressure naturally goes to my heel. But now my right elbow is pretty deep, right? It's buried back here. Again, it's a big exaggeration. I couldn't get my hand back here with my left hand on the club. So now as I come through, I've got to make room for this elbow, which is why I'm moving to 6, 7 o'clock, because that's moving my hip laterally out of the way to make room for this right elbow to come in. So don't think about where exactly your hand should be on the clock and where your pressure should be at the same time. That's missing the forest for the trees. I want you to feel it. I want you to feel how this is very natural. This is playing air guitar on a merry-go-round, right? Or as I was joking earlier with somebody, it's a very flamboyant way to direct traffic. I want you to go that way, right? If the village people were traffic directors, this is how they would do it. This is the point of this, is to feel this big exaggerated loop with your hand. Of course, you're not going to do that in your real swing. You can if you want to, but the point is that it makes it very easy to feel how everything syncs up together, like gears meshing together. So don't try to make it particular and say, well, my hand is at 5 o'clock and I know my pressure should be at this point. I want you to feel this. Let's see, club 2 inside and closing early. I'm not sure I understand, Craig, so give me a little bit more in there. Is the pressure changed, controlled by the right knee? Stand. The engine is the foot. That's it. I don't care where your right knee goes. Your right knee is getting moved by a pressure shift in your foot. That's it. That's the beauty of it, is it has to be simple. In order for this to be effective, you can't think 50,000 things, and you can't try to make it something more than it's not. It's meant to be incredibly simple by design, and it's meant to be only learned by feel, no positions whatsoever. I'm trying to get you out of that and force you to learn by feel, and there's a lot of byproducts that go along with this. First of all, let's just talk real life for a second. You're out on the golf course. You're on the 14th hole, and you're playing against your buddy for $5 Nassau, and your swing's starting to leak a little bit of oil. What do you resort back to when your swing starts to fall apart? Well, you resort back to however you learned, whatever tip that you've got or whatever mechanical feeling, these crutches that we rely on, these are what we resort back to in pressure. Now, the problem is when you start thinking technically, your brain can only handle one thought at a time. Your subconscious can handle gazillions. So we don't want to try and be mechanically thinking through our swing when the pressure's on in a real match, or even if you're trying to shoot your best score or whatever it is. We want to resort back to something that's going to be productive. Thinking mechanically is not going to be productive. I want to feel something. I want to step up to the team like, okay, I have to put this ball in play and I have to hit it properly. So what do I need to do? And my swing's leaking a little bit of oil. My stuff's getting a little loosey-goosey. I'm not really sure where this ball is going. Well, all I need to do is just get my foot moving again. I just need to get this free-flowing action. If I can do that and I can feel it, that's what I resort back to. So I'm not going to give you any technical things that you guys are looking for by design, so that when your swing does start to leak oil, you don't have any technical thoughts to fall back on in the first place. That's intentional. I'm trying to wean people away from that, because it's a very, very difficult way to put everything together consistently. Of course, millions and millions of golfers do it, but for everybody to have a universally effective way of doing things, I believe it's so much easier to have only a feel to rely on when things start going bad. Anytime that you're on the golf course, you're wanting to practice, you're wanting to warm up, you have this simple feel. Let's see. So let's talk a little bit about the right hand, left side stuff. So I've done a video on the site. Again, I've been getting beta testers to work on getting feedback for it. The point is, it doesn't matter if you want to be right side dominant or left side dominant. It doesn't matter. You can go either way. And there's a video on the site, left versus right, that I'll be putting out soon for everybody when we release everything on Masters Week. I just want to still get some more feedback on it, because we've been doing live lessons with people who are very lead side dominant, very trail side dominant. The point of this is that it doesn't matter. And that's really what I want you to understand. If you want to swing very lead side dominant, like I talk about in that video, or Ernie Els, I'll just give you a quick highlight of the video. The video opens with Ernie Els talking about the only thing he feels in his downswing is he just waits for his left arm to fall. That's his perception. That's his feeling in his swing. And of course, Ernie Els has a beautiful, rhythmical, tempo-driven, effortless golf swing and hits the ball a long ways. And then I have another clip right after him saying, Tiger Woods says, I feel everything in my right hand. Now, how do you reconcile those two? They both work. So what I wanted to do is give people a choice that you don't have to feel one way or the other. And again, leverage the ability to learn a full stroke in the golf swing, the full Monty, the full big picture with their dominant hand. Because again, most people are right side dominant. That's 90% of the people on the planet. So when you're very right side dominant, it's easier to learn this stuff with your dominant hand. But you can still, even if you're right hand dominant and you want to play left-handed, which Craig, one of our instructors, he's very lead side dominant. I've always been lead side dominant. I switched to right side dominant while I was doing this because I have a bunch of nerve damage on my left side. But I still can swing either way. And in fact, in that video, I hit drivers, both lead side dominant and right side dominant. They're a little bit different. I talk about the differences. But the point is, you get to choose. You get to choose what feels best for you. Do you want a more lead side, rhythmical, beautiful, classical golf swing? Or do you want a shorter John Rahm, Tony Finau-esque trail side thrust swing? They both work with this. That's the beauty of it. You can do either one. How to transition to doing this with the ball. That was another big thing. So that's a good question. I want you to hit balls right away. The whole purpose of this stuff is that I was trying to look at everything that I've seen over the last 26 years of teaching and take what I've learned and say, okay, now I've seen hundreds of thousands of people swing a golf club, and I've seen the same mistakes literally tens of thousands of times. How can I take that and get everybody that's doing these mistakes to move correctly and do it quickly? And one of the things that I've seen over the years is that people tend to get stuck in perfecting things. And certainly there's a point and a time for having things refined and dialed in, but they never get past that point. And they're so fixated on perfecting a position that the overall movement is lost. And so then when they go to hit balls, they've spent so much time in front of the mirror just going really slow, and they've not taken the time to build up some steps to go a little bit faster and a little bit faster and a little bit faster, that all of a sudden they can't make that transition, that leap from doing drills to hitting balls. This, by design, was to circumvent that. I want you to hit balls immediately. I want you to go out and immediately start swinging, not only hitting balls, but swinging fast. I want you to learn this by feel, swinging quickly, not by, now of course, there's a time and a place. If you're not getting it or you're missing pieces, again, we have lots of people who are going to be all over the spectrum, right? And so again, I'm looking at this holistically, not just like what one person does or what you might do. The point is that lots of people are going to do things differently. So when you're doing this, if you're going back and taking your time going really slow and getting all mechanical and thinking all these things, you're going to miss the forest for the trees. I want you to feel it in that right foot in that clockwise direction and start swinging quickly. That's going to be the fastest way for you to make the transition. Is there isn't a transition. You're moving quickly right away because the swing happens very fast. And that's what I want you to feel. And being able to feel one simple thing, just pressure shift around your foot, allows you to take this straight to the course and experience results right away. The squat to square happen naturally? Absolutely. Does this abandon dead drill? All right. So I could have had a mic problem earlier. So I was talking about this stuff. Nothing changes. The dead drill, the clamshell drill, the right shoulder blade glide, they're all the same things. It's all, this is taking all of that stuff and combining it into one simple movement that makes all of those things happen naturally. Now, of course, those of you who spent the time to really master the dead drill and learn the positions that you need to be in, this will be super fast because now you can see, oh gosh, now I can make it happen naturally and automatically. So those that haven't, and if you don't really understand still what's going on and how simple this movement really is, then you need to still look at the dead drill, like, oh, okay, now I see why my pressure needs to move in this clockwise direction, because I realize that my hip needs to go a little bit to the right, and then it's got to go back to the left, etc. Same thing in the downswing. As I'm coming through the squat to square, that's it. It's happening automatically. As my hip gets deep and I begin to shift my pressure and get up onto my toe, the squat to square, all those things happen naturally. Oh yeah, I'm going to put Chris's lesson off here. I don't know why it wouldn't let me put them both up at the same time. So I'm going to put Chris's up here now. So if you guys are looking for lessons with Chris, his is up there now. All right. What about angle of attack? Looks like it's coming in quite shallow. Absolutely. I want that thing to come in as shallow as I possibly can, because I want to hit the ball as high as I possibly can. Now, many of you who are flippers and scoopers, the idea of coming in shallow doesn't make sense, because you want to hit down on the ball more. The better you get, the more you realize that your shallower angle of attack is what you're seeking. So yes, this is by design teaching you how to come in very shallow. The average tour pro with a pitching wedge is only 4.7 degrees. That's very, very shallow. That's like bouncing off the Earth's atmosphere shallow. Now, of course, there are times where they're taking, digging squirrel graves with divots because they're wanting to change the shot shape or trajectory or spin rate or whatever it is. But the point is, absolutely, this is by design to shallow out the swing angle of attack, to make it very, very shallow so you can get height on the ball, because the balls don't spin today like they used to, and the clubs don't spin today like they used to. So if you're trying to come into a par 5 with a 3-wood, you need to hit that freaking thing straight up in the air to get it to stop and hold the green. Otherwise, you got to land it 30 yards short and try to squeeze it through some bunkers. So yes, by design, this is meant to be shallow. The release. The release should be automatic. You shouldn't be having to think about it, because as you begin to move clockwise, there's only so far you can go. And at some point, it's natural to let it release, right? So if I take my right hand, I'm going to exaggerate this for just a second. As I'm doing this with my right hand, this is way, way too shallow, of course. But at some point, I can't keep going. It wouldn't make any sense to keep going this way. So as I do that, now the club just naturally wants to release. So the point of the release is to feel it. I want you to feel how this clockwise motion makes the club naturally want to release, and at a counterclockwise motion at the last second. But you don't have time to think that, nor should you. I want you to feel how this happens naturally in the release. What's your initial move? There is no initial move. It's a feeling. Oh, my camera's off a little bit there. I don't want you to think about initial moves. I want you to get a feeling. I want you to feel how your pressure shift is moving. Your initial move is putting your brain in your foot and saying, I just want to feel this clockwise movement. That's the initial move. If you want to have a swing trigger or a forward press or whatever, I don't really care. Again, it's missing the forest for the trees. None of that stuff really matters unless it helps you do this movement more quickly, more easily. Can the right arm get too deep? Sure. You can still do something where you could do something goofy and get your right arm super deep. But again, if you're feeling the motion, it's very hard to get too deep with it. It's not been very common for us. I don't think we've really seen it at all. You'd have to do something really, really crazy for it to get too deep, because that clockwise movement of your foot makes your body begin to rotate, right? As I'm getting off the merry-go-round and I'm moving my hips, so I'm not going to move my shoulders at all, but look at my shoulder, look at my logo on my shirt. I moved my pressure on my merry-go-round, but my shoulders got turned. As my shoulders get turned, it pulls my hands back forward. That's why when you look at a certain play, like you look at a lot of tour pros, like Tiger as an example, his hands look like during the transition, they go straight down, right? You've seen this millions of times as I've talked about this in videos. But that's not what's really happening. His hands are actually doing this. Now, why doesn't it look like this? Because he's turning. As I turn, my hands get pulled back in a path out toward the ball. So it looks like they're going straight down, but the only way that they would actually go straight down is if my body stopped moving, right? Now, if I don't turn at all, I can make my hands go like this. But as soon as I start turning, my hands get thrust back out because my shoulders are turning. So you shouldn't get too deep unless you stall out your foot. How would this affect a specialty shot? It doesn't matter. You're just altering the release slightly, right? If I want to hit a little bit of a cut, I'm going to hold the release off. If I want to hit a little bit of a draw, I'm just going to stall my body out just a tiny bit to give my hands time to catch up. Very, very easy to shape the shots. Your hands should be relaxed. Steven, the audience is still thinking too much mechanically. Yep, you nailed it. I'm going to upvote that one myself. It's hard to kind of pull the rug out there. And for so many people, this is the #1 crux that I think that Craig and I would say we've seen. The only way you're going to screw this up is to try and make it mechanical. It's not mechanical. It's meant to be feel-based by design. It's intelligent intent that I was trying to think through all of the ways that people struggle with the golf swing. And how could I solve that? How could you take everything and boil it into one simple feel? And that is the key. So I will not give you the mechanical things to think about. I want you to feel how to do this quick pressure shift and this clockwise motion. All you gotta do is think clockwise pressure shift and some sort of clockwise movement with your hands, and that's it. Then you can reserve your brain power to release the club a certain way, to alter the release, to think about shot shape or trajectory or what have you, things that you normally couldn't even dream about doing in your swing because you're swinging so inefficiently and using your arms and hands for everything. Now they're in reserve because you can see there's no point in swinging your arms fast, right? Most people are going to go to the top and, again, shift back to a counterclockwise movement because that's what they feel like they need to do. And that's one of the challenges of golf. If you have a hit instinct, right? The little white demons out in front of you, what you've done is turned away from it, and now your body and your brain freaks out and says, well, I got to go back out there and get it because if that's out there, I turned away from it. What I'm telling you, instead of turning away from it, is to continue your clockwise movement. Of course, the club will still be brought back down to the ball just from the inside. Yes, the stuff will all be on the site, releasing all Masters week. So I'm going to remove that. Anterior hip pain with rotation to the left. Not sure. We have to take a look and see what's going on there. So what happened to vertical force? Nothing. I'll just answer that one really quickly. The thing with vertical force is that I hit balls where I had very low vertical force and still hit the ball a mile. And I hit balls with really high vertical force and my swing speed went down, and everywhere in between. So there is no direct correlation. Now, you can see, we shouldn't say that. That's not fair. There is a direct correlation in the longest hitters on the planet who see high peak vertical forces. And for sure you can see that. But I'm not out here trying to teach people to swing like Kyle Berkshire. You know, if you want to be a long drive guy, that's not what I'm doing here at all. I'm 5'9", 165 pounds and still swing 125 miles an hour. That's plenty fast. I'm talking about efficiency and consistency. Kyle Berkshire will never be on the PGA Tour. I'm sorry, it just won't happen unless he completely reinvents his golf swing. But I love his swing. It's awesome, fun to watch. But I'm not teaching people how to swing all out and swing at 150 miles an hour. So do you need these radically high vertical forces is the point to produce a lot of speed? Absolutely not. So you don't have to worry about it. And again, getting into a lot of these technical things, these measuring tools like this, which are super cool, without really understanding the bigger picture, which to me, the axiom is the big picture. If you just did this, you can go out and swing the club well enough to consistently shoot in the 70s right now. I'm not saying everybody's going to do that right now, but you can. And of course, we've seen lots of people who have done that. We've seen people go out and shoot in the 60s and shoot in the 80s who have never broken 100, et cetera. Because all of a sudden, your mind is freed up to move, to feel something in your swing, but you're also getting all of the things that happen in a tour pro swing, being on plane, being on path, being able to release and square the face, having speed, getting your hips open, maintaining your posture, not swaying off the ball. All of those things that amateurs do and pros don't, these all happen as a result. That's the point. Let's go out and have fun again. Let's just have a really simple swing. And if you want to work with us to perfect it and see how good you can get and try to fine tune it, of course, that's what we're here for. But the bigger picture is more important. Let's focus on the big stuff and not worry about all the details. How do we create maximum speed? The simplest way to create speed in the swing is to, again, think about your right foot as the gas pedal. It's the throttle of your golf swing. If you want to swing faster, move your pressure faster. Go around that circle faster. You want to swing slower, like a little pitch shot, make that slower. Really simple, just focusing on the foot. What if you have limited flexibility? Doesn't matter, doesn't require much flexibility here at all. Can you please show a slow motion and close-up of the right foot motion and exiting the merry-go-round? I'd really prefer not to, because again, it's not the point. It's not about looking at my foot and saying, oh, it moves exactly like this at this time in the swing. Trust your feeling. I've spent a lifetime searching for a feeling, a simple feeling that would make everything happen in the swing naturally. That's the point of this. It's not about making sure that you're at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock. It's the feeling of going around and coming up onto the toe, right? That's it. If you do that, you think about that knee pointing here, you're good to go. You don't have to make it any more complicated than that. So think about feeling this clockwise motion. That's it. As I come up onto my right big toe, I'm just getting my knee kind of going toward the target, replacing my left knee with my right knee so that my left knee straightens and moves back out of the way. And I'm coming up onto my big toe as a result of that. That's all happening without me having to be mechanical with it. I've always had really light grip pressure, so that hasn't really changed anything. But if you're death gripping the club, that's probably actually a good question for the group. He's asking, does the AXIOM change the grip pressure? People have really tight grips when they're hucking the club from the top, because you need to. Your body is not stupid. Your brain is not stupid. As much as you may think at times, like, what's wrong with you? You may think that your body's dumb. It's not. You're gripping the club tight because you need to. That's the part that you're probably not understanding. If you start to throw the club and this begins to go out away from you, of course you need to death grip this thing, because otherwise you're going to let go of it. You've thrown it at the wrong time. So what you should feel is that this is very natural. I'm barely holding on to the club at all. And that's where my speed's coming from, right? So if you're used to death gripping the club, should this feel with way less grip pressure? Absolutely, it should feel way less grip pressure. No, you don't need a loop in your swing. This was, again, an exaggeration of the clockwise motion. So no, definitely no loop in your swing. You can, reduce the grip pressure. Should you practice the dead drill or the AXIOM? They're one and the same. The movements are the same. It's the feeling that is allowing you to produce the positions of the dead drill. So if you're not nailing these things and you still tend to make a little bit of a mistake here or there, then the dead drill and all of those videos tell you exactly where you're supposed to be and how to get there. The AXIOM makes those happen automatically when you feel it and do it correctly. So that's the point. The dead drill positions and things that you've learned there are all exactly the same. So can you still work on those? Of course. That's what they're there for. This is a way to take that mechanical movement and transfer it and translate it into one feel that is global, that is in the entire golf swing. Like the dead drill really just focused on the hips and let you do what you want with the arms to a degree, and just really emphasize being a little bit more passive with it. This integrates the arms and the club and the lower body and everything all together as one holistic thing. Should this help keep tush line in place? Absolutely. That is very, very important. As I showed you earlier with the clamshell drill, when you're going back to 6 o'clock, your hip is naturally going to go deeper. Your right leg, trail leg, is naturally going to straighten up a little bit. We definitely don't want it hyperextended out, but it's natural as you do this for your right leg to straighten a tiny bit and your hip to get deeper. And then as you begin to move to 7 and 8 o'clock, your left hip is beginning to get deeper. And so, yes, it absolutely is designed to help your hips move through correctly. What have been the top 2 to 3 errors that we've seen in the beta test group? Great question. Hands down, I'm sure Craig will die to jump in here. 100% the foot stalling out. Focus on the arms, the club, try to add speed from the arms, going back to those old things. The foot dies immediately. That's the number one thing. It's really the only way to really muck it up, to be honest, is if your foot stops working. If you stop pressure shift and you start swinging with your arms and hands, your foot will stall immediately. You don't use your arms and hands and shoulders to huck the club down. Again, think about the direction of movement then. If I was to make a mistake and swing steep or what have you, it's going to be a counterclockwise movement with my hands. So if you keep your foot going and you just let your arms be more relaxed and let them just move in this subtle little clockwise circle, then you can't really screw it up. So right foot, that's your brain. That's the engine. It's the throttle. It's the brakes. It's everything. It allows you to focus on one thing that has this butterfly effect that gets everything moving. But if you lose focus on that and you get fixated on the arms and the club and the position and the sequence and all that stuff, you're going to make a bunch of mistakes that are totally avoidable. If you keep that foot going, none of those things will happen. Britt, thank you. Yes, you should feel athletic. And that's one of the greatest things. That's the biggest feedback that I've gotten, is that people feel fluid and athletic and dynamic again, instead of like this robot trying to make all of this stuff glue together. The swing is as complicated as you make it, right? There's guys who pick up the golf club and are just like, I got it. They naturally do this for whatever reason. And then there's pretty much everybody else who struggles their whole life with trying to figure out how to put the bat on the ball. In order to tap into your inner athleticism, you have to begin to move like an athlete, and you have to begin to feel things. Where a lot of this started for me was trying to explain to people how to drive on my racetrack. So you guys know I have a little dirt track at my house that I designed and built, and I let people bring their side-by-sides and cars, off-road cars over here and drive on it. And usually people are 4 or 5 seconds a lap slower than me. So I'm trying to explain to them how to get around this track fast in the dirt. I can't do it through mechanics. I can't say, okay, when you get to this tree, brake this exact amount and then turn the steering this exact amount. It doesn't work. These things are happening in milliseconds, just like they are on the golf swing. I have to tell them to feel this and feel that. And the golf swing has just always been missing that, because everybody interprets feeling so differently. So when you think about that, when you start feeling athletic again, and you start getting out of your own way, and you start feeling how to move instead of thinking how to move, that's where the magic really happens. Yeah, Christopher, great observation. It is. There's so much of this stuff going on. Like, if you look at golf instruction today, I know you guys go out on YouTube and scour the videos all the time for all the different instructors out there. And what's cool is, at least nowadays, a lot of instructors, the top tier instructors who have tools like 3D motion capture, force plates, high-speed cameras, launch monitors, all this stuff, are kind of all saying more of the same things, the mechanics, the same stuff that I've been teaching you guys for a long time. The mechanics and positions of rotary swing are what the tour pros do. So more and more players or instructors who measure and see the swing, from an analytical, data-driven perspective, know that this is what the tour pros are doing. So everybody's kind of all saying the same thing nowadays, the better instructors are. But the catch is they're all focusing on the minutia without seeing the bigger picture. And so you can't learn through minutia. I know there's those guys out there on YouTube who are talking about using 3D stuff and say, oh, well, the right shoulder, the left shoulder goes down to start the downswing. That's happening in like 1/1000th of a second. Can you think that? Of course not. But should your left shoulder go down naturally? Absolutely. As I'm moving my pressure, as I'm going from 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock and 8 o'clock, my left shoulder naturally goes down because my left hip is going back, just like you do in the clamshell drill and the dead drill. So the point of this stuff is that it's one holistic movement, and all of those things that happen in the swing, the little micro details, happen as a result. They're not things that you try to learn. They are things that happen as a result of you moving correctly. As far as the AXIOM stuff coming out on the site, that's coming out. It'll all be part of their normal premium membership on Masters Week, because we're going to release everything. We're still just doing some more testing. Is the motion a circle or the shape of your foot? That's, again, kind of fixating on the wrong things, Charles. Think about pressure shift in a clockwise direction. It doesn't have to be the shape of your foot or a circle. If you're trying to make it a circle, that's unnatural, because that's going to be way too big. It is technically kind of following the shape of your foot per se, although I wouldn't get too caught up in that detail. But that's what you're feeling. So of course it has to follow the shape of your foot, because that's what you're feeling is the pressure shift moving around the perimeter of your foot. But again, don't make it this big exaggerated motion. That's fine to do at first to get your pelvis moving, right? But as you free up and you get more relaxed, this movement happens very subtly and very quickly. And the Tour Pro videos that are on the site as part of the AXIOM test group show this stuff. I've got a Jessica Corda video who you can see this so clearly in her swing, exactly how her hips are moving throughout the swing. She's a phenomenal ball striker, has a wonderful golf swing. And same thing as I mentioned to John Rahm, you'll see that this movement is very, very simple. You don't have to make it any more complicated. Should the dead drill simplified? I like that. Yeah, it's the dead drill automagically. That's kind of the goal is, you know, that the movements of the dead drill are what every great ball striker on the planet does. It's inarguable. You can see it. It's quantifiable. It's totally obvious that these are what the Tour Pros do. But the point of it is that the Tour Pros didn't learn through mechanical positions. And as I mentioned, all the Tour Pros I worked with, none of the stuff that I do with amateurs is stuff that I did with Tour Pros. But they already had this underlying movement. They just did it. They didn't know how they did it. They didn't know why they did it. It was just natural for them to do it. And what I'm trying to do is find a way for an amateur golfer, a 25 handicapper who has no clue how to swing. And trust me, we've seen a lot of them, and take that person and get them to move like a pro. That's what's cool about this stuff. I love taking somebody who's way off their reservation and getting them to move fluidly and athletically and dynamically and properly without having to go through months and months and months and months of work. I want to do it fast, and this is the way to do that. Yep, Daniel, exactly. You want to speed it up, you just speed up the throttle on the right foot, and that's it. No more thinking. Yep, Stan, working through the dead drill. This is a way to make the dead drill very, very intuitive and natural. Yeah, Robert, I wish I'd known this a long time ago too. You and me both. The replay will be available after we're done here. So I'm just wrapping up some questions and see if there's anything that's been voted up to the top. Let's see. Yep, same motion for bump and run, short game shots. We've had a lot of people tell us that they feel like the short game stuff is so much easier for them now with this movement. Right knee faces 9 o'clock and yours is going to 2 o'clock. All right, well, that would be a big problem. So you need to get your knee and point it that way, which means your hips have to rotate. You've got to get both butt cheeks open at impact. And it's easier when you do that at first, letting your heel come up. That allows you to really come up. But in a real swing, we would be more like this, but my right knee, 2 o'clock would be way over there. So I don't know how your right knee would be pointing at 2 o'clock. It's got to point down the target line. Yep, Doug, if you go absolutely take this out to the course and try it. Feel it. See what you can experience with it. Gerald, that's awesome. Yeah, those of you who are be able to hit balls while you're doing this, you'll see it and feel it right away. That's what's cool about this stuff. Will this become a drill? Is this the rotary swing method? Yes. Again, nothing changes. My goal has always been able to find this overarching movement that makes all the positions happen naturally. So the things that you learn in rotary swing, again, none of that stuff changes. This is a way to make that happen automatically. This is the overarching movement. And the positions, all those videos and details and mechanics for all you engineers that want to deep dive into it, that stuff's still there. But my goal, I don't know if you guys remember this back in the 90s, you used to buy a DVD and everything you need to learn was, or VHS tape maybe, and everything you needed to learn was on that one video, right? You didn't have hundreds or thousands. I mean, there's millions of videos on YouTube right now. That's crazy. Literally, how could you possibly learn by going through millions of golf instruction videos? It's the worst thing. It's absurd. But that's what people try to do, is learn through tips. My goal with the AXIOM was I really wanted to boil the whole website down to one video. Now, can't quite do it as just one video. But you'll see when the new AXIOM content comes out that it's very streamlined. It's very simple. There's only a handful of videos that you really need to go into. And then there'll be a section where you can go back to get into the more details and nuts and bolts and stuff if you want to or need to. But the goal is that this is
everything. This is the simplest way to do this. And when you go back and you have some time to think about this and you look at the Tour Pros, you'll see that this movement was obvious all along. You can see it now. You can see the clockwise orbit of the knee, of the hip, of the pressure shift, of the hands. So somebody asked, what does the AXIOM stand for? The point was that this is so obvious and so simple that it was right in front of our face the whole time. And it just took a long time to kind of boil it down to something like this. But for me, that was always my goal, was to solve the golf swing. I had to come up with one thing that was a feel-based thing that you learned through moving quickly rather than slow motion, and made everything that you were trying to do in your swing automatic. And when you can feel this and see how it happens, then you understand what AXIOM really means. It is so obvious that there's no argument that this is what's happening in the best player swings. It's going to be something that's like, yeah, of course, that totally makes sense. You can feel it. You can get anybody to move correctly right away. And so at the end of the day, what AXIOM really means, it's about puring more shots, because that's what I'm out here for. I love crushing the ball right out of the center of the face with a perfectly dead square face. And that's what I'm trying to get you to do, is to experience more of that. All right, guys, I think that I've answered pretty much the most of them, as much as I can here. I'm trying to kind of thumb through them. There's a lot of different stuff that's kind of asked already or answered already. But here's the long and short of it. From this point forward, your swing should be simple. It should be feel-based. You should have a feeling that creates the positions that you're looking for. If you don't get it right away, it's okay. Not everybody has just gone out and played their best golf immediately. Some of them took a few days, some of them taken longer, some are still working through it. The point is, it's really, really simple. And if you don't make it simple and you're thinking through all these things, then get a live lesson with Chris or Craig and let them just see, because from our perspective, it's incredibly simple. We can see immediately how simple what you might be doing is wrong and you don't feel it. So get a quick live lesson or jump in one of their unlimited review groups so that you can just not waste any more time. You can get right to the promised land, get right to the nuts and bolts of what you truly need to feel and understand in your swing. And if you do that and you get a quick lesson, you're not going to spend all your time toiling away and trying to figure out, well, how do I glue from the takeaway to the top of the backswing? I know I can make a perfect takeaway with the shoulder blade glide, but I don't know where to go from here, right? Those are the types of things that I was trying to solve with this, things that I've heard over years where people just don't quite know how to put all this stuff together. So the goal is make your swing simple, make it really easy, make it effortless. If you're not there, let us help you. It's not going to take long to get this stuff. I probably will put myself out of business, but I'm just going to go back to racing cars. So I'll miss you guys if that's what happens. If not, I'll still be around, because my next project is putting. And I'm really, really, really far along with that. So I'll talk about that later. But I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up here. It's been a couple hours, guys. If you have any more questions, put them in the community. That's what it's there for. Chris and Craig and the other instructors are in there answering questions. So if it didn't get answered now, let's go in there, but also take a chance to read through this. There's a lot of posts in there, and I'm going to go ahead and start opening stuff up as we get ready for the big release of all of the AXIOM new content, so that you guys will be up to speed on that. So just keep checking back on the community. Otherwise, thank you guys so much. I hope that you learned a lot. I hope it gets you going in the right direction, and I will talk to you guys soon.